Kia ora and welcome to Sobriety Chat. I am your host, Lotta Dann. I am the community manager at Living Sober. And today I'm joined by Sheryl Jensen. Now, Sheryl is a pretty amazing woman. She's a company director. She's very interested in inclusion and belonging and culture change. She's also a board chair, a mum, a friend, a partner, an ocean lover, and of course, she is sober. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you, Lotta. Thank you very much. Wow, what an intro.
It's so good to connect with you. I really appreciate you coming and having this chat with us about, I suppose, your journey with alcohol. What can you tell us about your relationship with alcohol and what led you to quit?
Yeah, so I think it feels like alcohol has always been in my life right from the early age. I grew up with a farming family in the early 70s and 80s. And my parents were very much community-based and party goers. So they were either going to parties on the weekend or hosting them. And alcohol was always there, was always part of it. I guess we're a little bit of the good old rugby, racing and beer culture. And I think, early memories are getting up on a Sunday morning and seeing all the empty cups from the night before from Saturday night's party. And even from a young age, probably of about 7, I would be like, oh, I wonder what's in this glass, wonder what's in this glass, which sounds horrid at this stage saying that, but it was completely normal. And mum and dad probably had no idea, but introduced to alcohol very early and just seemed not like a normal part of life, I guess.
Yeah, it's the same as me. I grew up with it all around, and this is the power of modeling, I suppose. And when you see it as a normal thing that adults do, then you're curious about it and you just think it's a normal thing. And so I don't know about you, but as I entered adulthood, I just couldn't wait to get amongst it.
Yeah, it just seemed like rite of passage almost. And that was part of becoming an adult, was adding the alcohol to your life. So, I think right throughout my 20s, it was a big, huge part. And I remember entering into the workforce, and Friday night drinks, cocktails, work events, team building. It all had alcohol involved in it, and that was the fun part. So yeah, and especially when someone else is paying for it, it's even more fun. Also,
absolutely. What sector were you in when you were in your 20s in the workplace?
Oh, quite a variety. So I started off in banking, down in Wellington actually, and then went into media, insurance, and then education, all sorts, really, all sorts. So
And they're all intrinsically linked with a drinking sort of culture of, as you say, Friday night drinks and any sort of event.
some more than others, but definitely the corporate ones were heavily linked to that. Yeah.
It's the same with me. I started my career in newsrooms and journalism, and yeah, one of my jobs as the intern was doing the Friday night booze order, and it would come in, around 4 p.m. and we'd usually start drinking then. And it just years and years and years of waking up on a Saturday morning with a massive hangover.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And even worse, in my early 20s, I think there was a few driving home pieces where I just cringe to the thought now. But it just,
Yeah.
I guess, I just wasn't thinking at the time, and yeah, probably lucky.
So what happened then? Don't want to kind of. I know these stories are big stories and they're hard to summarize, but what
Yeah.
happened that got you thinking about it and then making this big decision to actually take it out of your life? How did it get to that?
I think we were on holiday in Bali as a family, and sort of midway through, and as with holidays, I don't know if I'm generalizing or not, but you have a few drinks, a few cocktails by the poolside. And it was the morning after a big night. And I just thought, I don't think this is serving me anymore. My family was there. I didn't feel like I was there for my family because I was hungover the next morning. Um, I didn't feel like I was the best mum for my son. And I think I wanted to role model, one of your words earlier on, a different way of being. And so just in the middle of our holiday, I decided that was it. That was the end of it. And I think my partner at the time sort of, laughed under his breath and thought, oh, we'll see how long this lasts for. But nearly 5 years later, here we are. So,
Had you
yeah.
had attempts before to quit? Is that why
I
partly
had,
the reaction was, let's see how this goes, or was
no,
yeah.
I hadn't made the decision to go cold turkey. There's been over the years before that, I think there'd been a time where I'm like, I don't want to drink during the week, because probably in my early 30s, I was in the mum wine o'clock arena of having a wine every night as I cooked dinner. It just became the norm. And then when I hit my 40s, I thought, oh, I just can't handle this so much anymore. But it was definitely a Friday, Saturday drinking sessions. But I noticed just even in those couple of years before I quit that I'd made a commitment to Friday, Saturday, but then I'd have a bad day on Wednesday and I'd just have a little wine to sort of ease the pain of that. Or maybe Monday was a hard day to get through, so maybe there'd be a little wine on Monday. And it seemed to be almost like a medicated thing that I would do to either make myself happy or chill myself out. So it started to creep in. The 2 days that I thought I'd just keep it to ended up sometimes being 4 or 5.
Mm.
So it was, yeah, I kind of noticed it. And I noticed, and I can't say for sure, but I noticed my memory was getting worse and worse. Um, and I remember working for, you asked me who I worked for years ago, for this medical institute, and I won't mention the name, but this was about almost 25 years ago. And they had some research on alcohol at that time that was linked to memory loss and Alzheimer's. And I remember saying to them, are you going to put this out there? And they said, you've seen how long it's taken for people to realize tobacco is harmful. We can't put this out there because of how much sponsorship alcohol gives to corporations and how linked corporations are to our funding. So it kind of blew me away. And I think that had always been in my mind over the years. Like, heck. I mean, it didn't stop me at the time 25 years ago. I should have looked at that research and, put a stop to it right then. But I think as I got older, that experience kept coming back to me. And that was a little bit around my decision as well to stop, because I had a feeling it was affecting my health in more ways than I realized.
Okay, there's so much there to pick up on, including just a brilliant illustration of why it's so hard to shift things because of the money that the liquor industry holds, and how that translates to power and influence around messaging. But before we get to that, I just want to go back to that. I mean, you've got such a lovely sort of slightly casual way of describing. I just thought that, that's it with that final decision. But it sounds like you'd really had an eye on it for a few years. You were trying to do the weekends only and these other days, and you were very aware there was that awareness and a critical eye on your habit. So did it feel quite monumental, that final decision where you were like, that's it, I'm actually stopping? Or was it more of a, a solidly sort of casual, I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of decision?
I think for me, inwardly, it was monumental. Outwardly, I tried to make it casual. But I probably played down a little bit that I had a big night before, but I think it was just like, I think I've embarrassed myself, embarrassed my family, hurt my family, and that's it. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't have a great relationship with alcohol. It's time to sit up, take notice, and do something differently.
And then
Yeah.
alongside that, that awareness that the product itself, the drug itself, was actually more harmful than the messaging that we get would lead us to believe. And this is a huge part of the problem that we have now. But before we sort of get into that bigger picture stuff, how did it go for you? And particularly, how did it go for you in a work sense? Because you are in the kind of corporate-y, networky, you know, events kind of world. How was it for you when you transitioned to doing all of that and not having alcohol?
I think I was actually in a fitness organization at the time. So while that was like a good, healthy decision, I remember I headed overseas not long after my decision for work. I headed to the UK, and one of my UK counterparts there, I said, "Oh, I've given up drinking." And she said, "Oh, that could be a little bit career limiting." And I just laughed at the time. I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, a lot of networking and promotions and supporting of projects, and where you go in the business can be linked to social occasions with alcohol. And if you're not one of them, you're not one of them."
Wow.
So I was like, I don't think I really believed it at that time, but as I went through and, I'd go to the Friday drinks, but I didn't drink alcohol anymore. I noticed, and probably not from just a corporate sense as well, like friends were like, "Oh, this is a shock." And perhaps not as many social engagements came through. I don't know if they thought I wouldn't be as fun, but definitely noticed with work, like the team building, the big conferences, but even more than that, just socially, people would go out after work and they would go out for a drink, and that's where a lot of business talks take place.
Yeah.
I know this because I've been in that, I was in that world. So I think I started to realize how, maybe at first, how excluded I was, but then possibly how I'd excluded other people when I'd been on that other end. So it really made me think about all the reasons that people don't drink. And it's not that they just give up, it can be religious reasons, they're training for an event, they're pregnant.
Mm.
I mean, so many reasons that no one has to justify. But there just weren't those options, or a lot of options around team building and networking are all centered around booze. So,
Mm.
and
And if you're not a part of that world, and New Zealand is so based on that kind of way of connecting, then yeah, you are limited. I mean, was your career limited though? Did it come true, the warning that you'd been given?
I don't know, because I left the role for several reasons. It was just, I just felt it was time to move on and grow and develop and start my own business. And the business was around workplace culture, and as you said earlier on, very passionate about inclusion and belonging. And I guess I hadn't thought about the drinking sense of it until um, I'd been working in my own business for a little while, and then I thought about how the inclusion or exclusion with stopping drinking is all part of that workplace culture.
Mm.
So it was kind of a feeling of, there's so many different aspects of a workplace culture that you can just make a little change to, that will help include people and make them feel like they belong, and just offering them options of different drinks, or not being sort of surprised that someone doesn't drink, can make them feel all that much more included. in a workplace.
Was it as simple for you as going along but just having a different type of liquid in your glass, or was it the fact that you weren't kind of getting lightheaded and intoxicated like the others that also, do you know what I mean? Because oftentimes I say to people, you can go to things, the liquid in your glass doesn't give the whole event its power, but it sounds to me like it's not just the liquid in your glass, it's actually the boozy kind of camaraderie vibe that's dominating a lot of those events that are centered around alcohol.
Yeah, interesting you say that, because I think when I first gave up, I drank more kombucha than I've ever drunken before, probably overloaded on kombucha. And then about that time, it came out that kombucha actually has a small amount of alcohol in it. So it was very much looking at the back of different products to have a look what was in it. But yeah, I mean, I still went along to events, still had fun. Uh, and I don't know if it was missing that social lubrication. That sounds a little bit funny, but you know how you have a few drinks and you feel a little bit more lively,
Yeah.
or some people do. Maybe that was hard at first, but it was more. It's the mindset and culture that when you say to people, "Oh, I don't drink," they're like, "Oh, why not?" Like there must be something wrong with you, or something's happening if you don't drink, rather than just going, oh yeah, okay, and it being normal. I think it's gotten better.
I was going to say, in the 5 years since you've quit, there has been a shift where it's more accepted. But yeah, you still sometimes get that. Oh, and I don't know about you. If I'm really honest, when I was a drinker, which I was very enthusiastically for over 20 years, I thought non-drinkers were boring. I
Yep.
just did.
Yeah.
Immediately, I pegged them as kind of not, I have to be honest about that, because I was just woo drinking, being just loose and disconnected, thinking I was connected, but actually disconnected. Anyway, yes, and I would judge people who weren't drinking.
Definitely, that was me as well. I think I remember saying in my early 30s, when someone said, "Oh, I don't drink," I said to them, "Oh, we probably just can't be friends," which sounds horrible now, and it's still horrible. But that was just a mindset. I was part of a group, a wider culture that belonged to that that booze centered events piece. Yeah.
So now you do work in this space, and if it's okay with you, I'll put a link in the description for this chat. But you help other organisations with their workplace culture and things around inclusion and belonging. Does the alcohol conversation happen, and how does that go?
I have to say it doesn't come up specifically, but I was really surprised because I posted about it on LinkedIn, and I'd been thinking about posting about it for probably 6 months before I was brave enough to actually do it. And the response from that kind of blew me away.
Well,
it
that's
was
how I found you, Cheryl. Let's be honest about that. It was
yeah,
that post that brought you here.
yeah. So there was something like 400 comments, and um, close to 10,000 engagements, and we're getting up to
Wow.
a million views, and it was just a little bit overwhelming, if I'm honest. But it was also humbling to see the comments that people were making and their experiences. And it obviously resonated deeply with more people than I expected, and not just in New Zealand, but around the world. People are feeling it as well. So I think they just
Yeah,
want choices
because
and options, and yeah.
and this is the truth about our normalized society. Within it, there are so many people who are struggling, so many people who are questioning, so many people who are interested, sober curious, grey area drinkers, or people who are really really struggling, but keeping it private, going to the networking events, no one else sees their shame, no one else hears their internal dialogue, which is
Mm.
conflicted and confused. Like there is just this mass of angst in amongst this normalized, glorified world we live in with regards to alcohol. And it breaks my heart. And it's why I do what I do, because we need to see some shifts. I mean, what do you think needs to happen? What do you think needs? That's a big question. What do you think needs to happen in New Zealand to shift our alcohol culture?
Um, I think hospitality needs to get a little bit more hospitable in terms of what they offer for non-drinkers. And I still question myself about there's 0% beer and 0% wine, and there's the AF brand is very popular, but I question myself because I love a 0% beer every now and then, but I wonder if I love it because, and in my mind I quite like 0% beer because they're not sweet. Everything else is like and mocktails are great, but they can get very sweet, whereas beers doesn't have that sweetness. But I also wonder if part of it is that I stand there with a green bottle or a can and I'm part of the group again, even though it's 0%. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's part of that belonging piece. And I think that's calmed for me because I'm actually quite comfortable just standing there with a glass of water now. But early on, I just wanted to feel like part of the group again. Yeah. So I
yeah,
think in New Zealand, I have to say most places are pretty good. Like they will have a 0%, and they will have some options for alcohol free drinks. And I say that because I've just been overseas. I've been Thailand, Malaysia, and Hawaii, and they're very good with the mocktails. But you ask them for a 0% beer, and most of them won't know what you're talking about. So
interesting.
um, I think New Zealand's possibly better than we think in comparison to other countries. But my positivity lies in our young people. And this is a big generalization, but my son's 19 and his friends are in that 19, early 20s stage. And yes, they will have a drink or two, but I often see sometimes at parties that the younger people will grab those 0%, or they will be having non-alcohol, or they'll have one or two and then go, yeah, I've had enough. Like, yeah, could take it or leave it, which is a complete change from when I was that age. I mean, just complete. So
Yeah.
I,
Oh no.
I think progress is being made.
Yeah, I know, and the statistics do show that the younger people are drinking less. There are still pockets of harmful binge drinking, but yeah, I'm noticing with my teenagers as well. I mean, they're curious about it and they are drinking, which is a bit of a minefield, if I'm honest, from a sober parent perspective. But yeah, it's less of that hunger and that pull and that just the fun is going out and getting blitzed every night, which is what I was certainly doing when I was growing up. Um, yeah, and zero alcohol. This it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I was reading Guy and Spinner's book recently, Proof, and he wrote about. Sorry, it's called The Drinking Game. His documentary was called Proof, and he sort of wrote about how it's a bit disingenuous of the brands to be doing the 0% because it's actually about brand identification and recognition, and it does still people pull people towards the alcohol. But I
Mm,
know from living sober and just in my world that for a lot of sober people, it does really work, like you say, because you can stand at an event and you can hold it and you can feel it removes that whole layer of difference and judgment. And, and I always say to people, if it's not triggering you, do it. I
yeah.
personally feel quite triggered when I drink no alcohol beer and wine, so I just don't touch it.
Mm, yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, um, in a general sense, before we close, and I could keep chatting to you for ages, but we won't do that. But how's it been for you living sober? Has it been what you expected? I mean, 5 years is a good long stint now. You obviously you shifted with your work. How has it informed your life being a non-drinker?
I think to begin with, it was almost, and I remember thinking this probably in my early stages, that all the color had been sucked out of my world and all the joy, and but actually there was a haze that alcohol had for me, that was keeping me in the haze. And so when I stopped and got through I'm losing all the, there's no joy and fun, blah blah blah, when that all when I didn't feel that way anymore, I kind of felt that I was a lot clearer. My thinking was sharper. My health improved. I was better as a partner, as a mum, as a friend. So it's been great. It's there's been times where I'm like, feel a little bit left out of the group, or the odd man out, or the odd woman out.
Yeah.
But now I'm quite comfortable and strong in my stance around just the choice for myself. Everyone has their own choice. I don't mind if other people drink. That's their thing. But I feel quite confident in myself and my choices. So yeah, there would never be going back for me. I think it's been amazing, and everyone has a different journey. It's hard for a lot of people, but I just think my mind's been focused on the good things that it brings, and keep going with that.
Awesome. I love that, Cheryl. I mean, how brilliantly articulated. And yeah, it's a haze and you don't realize it when you're in it. And it's a hard transition to go from being a drinker to being sober. And we always say, because a lot of our members are in those early stages, and we say, keep going, keep going. I promise it gets easier. And, you're 5 years down the track now, and saying, it is better and it has got improved, and things aren't perfect because, life, but
Yeah.
just without that haze and that in the way, it's yeah, and then just also not having to worry about all those horrible side effects that we're now learning are,
Yeah.
pretty intense with alcohol.
Yeah, and I think more and more research is now coming to the forefront. It's not that it's new; it's just that it's coming. It's more accepted and coming out. So it's a mindset change for a lot of people, I think.
Well, you are awesome, and thank you for replying to my LinkedIn message and
No, it's been a
coming
pleasure.
on here and doing this chat with me. I just think what you add from a sort of that corporate-y perspective is really valuable, and it's not something we hear a lot of here at Living Sober, but I know a lot of people are impacted by that world. So really, really appreciate you sharing, honestly, and yeah, just so happy you're in the cool sober gang.
No, thank you, Lotta. Thanks for inviting me on here. Absolute pleasure. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, cheers.
Thank
Bye.
you.